The CSS Richmond was a Confederate ironclad that served on the eastern front of the American Civil War. The casemate of a Richmond was made of railroad iron, pine, and oak planks. The iron was 4 inches thick and the wood was 22 inches in total. The iron extended 3.5 feet below the waterline, but below that it was wood. The ship had one propeller that could give it a speed of 5 to 6 knots. This is a full cutaway view of the CSS Richmond. On the gun deck are placed 4 guns, which are positioned in such a way as to allow 360 degrees of fire. There are 2 empty gun ports on either side of the guns at the bow and stern. This is because the guns were mounted on iron rails so they could turn to point out either of the alternate gun ports, allowing the Richmond to deliver a broadside. The pilot house was also on the gun deck. All decks below the gun deck were underneath the waterline. At the front, the standard crew hammocks, and at the back, the officers' quarters. Below these, the powder magazine, where powder, shot and shell were held along with supplies for the crew. Ammunition would be hoisted up to the gun deck in its own shaft. The largest room in the middle holds the vertical, single-cylinder steam engine, its boilers and furnace, along with the coal. This engine was grossly underpowered for the size of the ship. In 1861, General-in-Chief Winfield Scott of the Union Army proposes the Anaconda Plan. This was the Union naval blockade of the South. The solution to break the blockade for the state of Virginia was to build an ironclad out of the captured Union frigate, the USS Merrimack. The transformation from wood to iron would take place at Norfolk Naval Shipyard, July 1861. The Merrimack, now a Confederate ironclad, would be renamed CSS Virginia. CSS Virginia would go on to make history at the Battle of Hampton Roads, sinking many wooden vessels and dueling with the Union's own ironclad, the USS Monitor. With her success, she would inspire many more southern states to build ironclads of their own. But very soon, the naval objective shifted from breaking the blockade to guarding the James River, which directly led up to Richmond, the capital of the Confederate States. The Virginia was not suited for this task, as it drew far too much a draft to be able to maneuver up the river. It was scuttled by its crew in an attempt to make more obstructions for the Union forces. The life of the CSS Richmond, like the CSS Virginia, started at Norfolk Navy Yard March 1862. She was launched unfinished on the 6th of May 1862 to be towed up the James River to Richmond to escape a Union advance on the Navy Yard. The ship would be completed in July. There would be no action until late May 1864. By now there were 3 ironclads to defend the capital that were named the James River Squadron. These ships were the CSS Virginia II, the CSS Fredericksburg, and the CSS Richmond. River obstructions were removed, and the CSS Richmond along with the 2 other ironclads moved down the river to bombard the enemy. The ships took part in engagements at the Dutch Gap August 13th, Fort Harrison on the 29th of September, and Chaffin's Bluff on the 22nd of October. The largest battle that the CSS Richmond took part in was the Battle of Trent's Reach, January 23rd to 24th, 1865. As Union forces were moving up the James River, General Ulysses S. Grant formed a base at City Point. The James River Squadron was to recapture it and take back control of the river. Led by the CSS Fredericksburg, the ships started on their way under the cover of night. CSS Richmond and CSS Virginia II ran aground close to the Union obstructions at Trent's Reach. The 3 ships were spotted and were fired down on by Union artillery. The shots did not penetrate the armor. By daylight, all ships were back in the water and faced off against the USS Onondaga, a double-turreted monitor deployed from City Point. The CSS Richmond's iron armor was penetrated by the Onondaga. Damaged, the 3 ships retreated up the river to Chaffin's Bluff. 3 months later, Richmond, the capital, was evacuated and orders were given to the James River Squadron to scuttle their ironclads to prevent capture. The CSS Richmond sank in her place and remains there at the bottom of the James River to this day.